Hello friends, my name is Amanda, and in case you're new here, on this channel I talk about pretty much anything in my life. I am currently in occupational therapy school doing my master's, and this is my second master's, so I have student loans from both. And my husband has student loans from his bachelor's degree. And recently I have started talking about, as you can tell by this intro, about student loans and debt and finances and all of that. So today in this video, I'm going to be talking about what to do when you find yourself in the situation of, man, I have a lot of debt, whether that's student loan debt, credit card debt, private loan debt, whatever, personal loan, just what to do, how to get started, where do you even start when you realize you're thousands of dollars in debt. So I'm going to kind of go based off of what we did and I guess some things that we would have done differently. So we had the conversation about debt from like the very beginning. I say we, meaning me and my husband. We had the conversation from when we were dating. We were like very serious in our relationship from the beginning, so we had this conversation early on, but we didn't do something very proactive about it. We got to the first step on this list and then we kind of like let it sit for too long, and then it wasn't until 2019 that we started to like really attack this more aggressively. So if you want more information on like our totals and all that, that was in my last video. So let me start with the first thing that you have to do is you have to figure out what you owe. So find out all your login information for your, car loan, your student loans, all of those things, and really figure out what you owe. And something that I would recommend if you really have kind of been ignoring your student loans, some people find out that they have other student loans that they weren't aware of, especially if your parents were doing like the signing of paperwork and it was like in college and you were just young and like not really paying a whole lot of attention to those things. So I would look at your credit report just to make sure that there's not anything else that you're unaware of. So I would look at all those, write all of those down, write down your total, your interest rates, because that's extremely important, whether those interest rates are variable or whether they're fixed, because again, that's hugely important. For example, I think I mentioned in one of my past video that some of my husband's student loans were variable, and I assume when he took them out, they were probably very low, but they got up to like almost 10% for student loans. So just really pay attention to those things because they can change. And also I would write down the estimated payoff date, just so you can see like where this is kind of heading, not to be, negative, but just so you can see the reality of like what making those minimum payments is going to do. Because a lot of times you'd be surprised. It's like, you see that that's not going to be paid off for 12 years down the road. And it's like a big reality check. And it's also motivating when you see how much earlier you end up paying them down. Or, your plan, how early your plan is going to get you there. So that's the first step. I think you can't go any further unless you know those things. So then from there, I would get on the same page as your significant other or spouse. This was something that was hard for us, I think, and why it took us a while to really get into it was because I think I was, and this is all my fault, but I was more hesitant. I was under the impression that like, oh, like student loans, like if that's the worst that I have because I didn't have any other debt, was like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. And I mean, it wasn't at the time, I guess, because I had $20,000 worth, and that may seem like a lot for some people, but in comparison to like what my husband had or like, what you pay for other grad programs, it wasn't a lot. So anyway, I just wasn't quite ready to make the leap, and it wasn't until later that I was. So get on the same page, really have that discussion, and it may take a little bit of time. Like I was the person who it took a little bit of time to get on the same page. Then I would say to look at your bank transactions and really see what you're spending money on. If you haven't done a budget, if you don't keep track of those things, and even if you do think that you like have a general idea, look at what you're actually spending, because I think it wasn't that we spent a ton of money, because we weren't people that like went out a lot and like ate out every night and whatnot. But even the like going out to eat once a week, like a date night, and then my husband he would get lunch at work every day. And you think like it's only a couple bucks here and a couple bucks there, but it adds up so quickly. And so although it felt like we weren't spending a lot, because we were making these like $5 purchase, $5 purchase, $5 purchase, it was adding up to be a lot. And when you add that up over, a couple months, then a year, then like it adds up to be a lot that you could be putting towards your debt or saving or doing whatever. So look at those things and really see what you can cut out. Like, for example, an easy one is to just start taking your food to work. I know it's a common sense one that no one wants to, like, it's a hard pill to swallow. But, that's just an example of like something that we figured out. But also I would say to see what your priorities are. Because one thing that I personally don't believe, like, I am not a hardcore like Dave Ramsey person in that I'm like, okay, we're gonna live off of nothing and never buy anything until we're debt free, and it's gonna just be like this rough life for a couple years. Yes, it is going to be difficult and you're gonna have to cut back on things, but for me, I think that personal finance is personal, and I think that means that there are things that you can adjust to accommodate what your priorities are. For example, me and my husband, our favorite like thing to do on weekends and like date wise and things is to go get coffee. So I know for a lot of people, coffee like is one of the things that they say, oh, cut out immediately, etc. Well, that's just our thing that we like to do. We don't go out and like do other expensive dates, like just coffee. So we decided to keep coffee in our budget. And so we did definitely significantly downgrade what we were spending before, because we were spending a ton of money on coffee, but we kept some money in for coffee. Also, we did a sinking fund. If you don't know what a sinking fund is, I will explain it in a little bit, but we did a sinking fund for vacations and flights. So since we live in Florida now, because I think I mentioned again in my last video that we moved here so I could go to school, and all our family and friends are in Arizona. So we knew that we would be flying to Arizona to see our family and friends. So we went ahead and took, that preventative measure, I guess, and put that into our budget as a sinking fund so that we could save up for tickets to fly there. So that is going into the next thing, is to make sure that you have an emergency fund and that you set up sinking funds. So an emergency fund, for example, Dave Ramsey suggests that $1,000 emergency fund. A lot of people find that this isn't enough money to cover like a true emergency. So that's personal again to you. Some people want to have a couple thousand. Some people, feel fine with 1,000. That is mostly up to you. We had already had savings before we started this journey, so we didn't have to like go back and start an emergency fund for this purpose. So the other thing is sinking funds. So sinking funds are funds that it is things that will come up. For example, car maintenance, medical appointments, for us like flights/vacation. For us as well, there's a part of my tuition that we pay in cash that isn't covered by my student loan. So that's another thing that we save up for because it's due every semester. So we know that that's going to come up. So we have those sinking funds so that we do not have to panic when that month comes that we have, a doctor's appointment or whatever the case may be, and try to scrape together the money for that. So that's a great idea. I highly recommend sinking funds. That used to be a big thing of like stress and anxiety for me, was when, for example, like I said, a doctor's appointment or plane tickets, for sure, to like have to, when I was normally budgeting for, $600 a month, of other expenses, and now I have to budget for like twice that amount for 2 plane tickets. So it would cause me a lot of stress and anxiety. We'd have to get out savings, or it just was a stressful thing to think about. And now, like, sure, I still am a little stressful, anxious person, but that has taken a huge weight off my shoulders, and I just could not recommend it enough. That's something that once we have our debt paid off, that I will continue to carry on, because it is just amazing. So then I think the next thing that you need to do is figure out whether you want to use the snowball method or the avalanche method, or whether you want to do a mix of both. So the snowball method is where you start with your lowest total amount loan. So if you have a loan that's 10,000, 5,000, and 2,000, you would start with the 2,000 loan, and you would put any extra money that you have towards that loan, and then you'd pay the minimum on the other 2 loans. And then once you're done with the $2,000 loan, you put all the money you were putting into that into the $5,000 loan, and then you just continue up to the highest amount. The other method is the avalanche one, and it is the highest interest rate. And that is basically what we did because, like I mentioned, we had a lot of high interest rate loans. And but we did do a little bit of a mix. Like, we did shift gears at one point, but it was like maybe the second, the next one down the list of percentages. And that was like purely for motivation purposes. Like, I was getting kind of burnt out because my husband's loans were higher interest rate, which sounds silly because I mean they're both of our loans, but mine was also like a huge amount, and so it was just like burning my eyes every time I looked at it. So we decided to go ahead and tackle the bigger one. But that was after we had paid our largest interest rate one. So you can do a mix of both. It really is, again, personal to you. And then the second to last thing is to find new ways to spend your time. So as I mentioned, you're going to have to cut out things. And if you are someone who really likes to go out and, spend a lot of money on different types of activities, like some of those things are going to have to be cut out. Of course, like I mentioned, you can still do things, but it is going to have to be scaled back a bit. And so I recommend just finding cheaper alternatives or free alternatives to do. So for example, like I mentioned, like now our dates are like coffee shop dates instead of like fancy dinner dates, even though we really like to do that before. But another thing is like if on the weekends, like we'll play board games and like do puzzles. And I know that like to some people that sounds really boring, but just finding those different things that you can do that just aren't so costly is huge and will make the journey a lot less like miserable, and that you're just not sitting there on your couch like, so sad that you can't go do things because you're paying off debt. So, and the last thing is to just get started. Like, I know that sounds like so obvious, but the thing is that like you can do all of these things and just never get started because you think like, oh, next month will be better, so and so time in the future will be better. But like, just do it. Just get started, because as soon as you get started, I think that it is so motivating to see your debt go down that you will be like hooked and really invested in it, rather than just continuing to wait until, whatever better time in the future comes up, and that better time just may never come up. So just get started. So that is my tips on how to get started when you find out you have tons of student loan debt or card debt or credit card debt, whatever the debt may be. If you guys enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and please subscribe below for future videos, and leave me a comment and let me know what are some of your tips for getting started on this journey, and if you have any videos that you would like to see from me in the future. But I will see you guys next time. Bye.